Have you always been so good at negotiation?
Nobody's always good at it. Nobody's always good at anything. Negotiation is two things. It's a learned skill and it's a perishable skill. Jim Camp a long time ago referred to negotiation as a human performance event. Now, he would put it in that category because at one point in time he was a football coach. But in point of fact, that's true. So emotional intelligence is unlimited and perishable. Great negotiation is just emotional intelligence, reading the person, seeing what the possibilities are in the moment, and then really where it goes has to do with what your intention are. Long-term trusted relationship, or am I trying to exploit you? Now, I can get away with exploiting you once, but you're not going to repeat with me again. And I realize that there's no such thing as a one-off. I'm a big believer in karma in general, and I figure I'm going to see you again. Like one of my students at Georgetown went into Home Depot. In my book, Never Split the Difference, there's a chapter on bargaining towards the end, and it's called the Ackerman Bargaining Method, and it's ridiculously effective. So he goes into Home Depot, and he just kills him on a price. Just gets one of the best prices on the cabinets that you could possibly imagine from Home Depot. It's got to come back a couple of weeks later because there's a problem. You think they want to help him? This is a guy that cut their throat before. They're charging him for every dime and still dragging their feet. So there really aren't one-off negotiations. And so I treat everybody like I got to live with my intentions, and I want them to continue to do business with me for 20 years.
So that strategy that you taught that he employed, what were the actual steps in him to achieve the cheapest cabinets, even if it just be once?
I don't bargain. I negotiate. And I negotiate with long-term prosperity in mind. So I can beat you on the price. And I have in the past. And one way or another, it's always come back to haunt me. Now, every now and then you're going to have somebody on the other side of the table you got to get into bare knuckles bargaining with. But that shouldn't be your default move. It should be your last move. What's wrong with that? Because if I put you on a price and I need you for anything else, you're going to pay me back with interest. At least 2x, if not more, over what I saved on the initial price. So bargaining like crazy is a great way to defeat yourself long term. And if you and I get into a negotiation, I'm going to want you to give me your real price. Most people make this mistake of asking for more than what they want. There's a lot of advice out there, anchor high, ask for more than what you want, be willing to settle for less. But number one, I've done this long enough that if you ask for more than what you really want, you've lied to me. That was a lie. And then it becomes very easy to excuse yourself for lying all the time, one way or the other. And then people eventually find out. And then people know that, look, I can't trust him. He's not going to tell me what he really wants, what's really going to make him happy. He's going to exaggerate. He's going to distort everything he says to me. And at some point in time, I'm just going to stop talking to you, period. If I can't count on you to tell me the truth. And so asking for more than what you really want, by definition, is a lie to begin with.
When did you realize you had a knack for negotiation?
I realized I enjoyed applying emotional intelligence when I was working to become a hostage negotiator. Because when I first wanted to become an FBI hostage negotiator in New York, I was rejected because, in point of fact, I was eminently unqualified. The woman who was running the team, I approached her. She knew who I was. She was in a different squad on the terrorist task force. At the time, I'm working domestic. She's working international. And I walked up to her and said, hey, I'm Chris Voss. She's, yeah, I know who you are. I want to become a hostage negotiator. And she's like, yeah, you and everybody else. Everybody wants to do it. Sounds easy, sounds fun, sounds sexy. People want to sign on. They want to get the T-shirt. And then they don't want to do anything afterwards. Just a cool thing to be. Say you're a hostage negotiator. So she says, I know you were a cop. Were you on the hostage negotiation team of the police department? I'm like, nope. She said, you got a degree in psychology or a related degree. I'm like, no. She said, you have anything on your resume at all that would qualify for you to be a hostage negotiator? I'm like, no. She says, well, you can't. Forget it. Stop bothering me. And I'm persistent. I'm coachable, which I didn't really realize at the time. And I take instruction from the right people. Never take advice from somebody who hasn't been where you want to go or somebody who you wouldn't trade places with. So anyway, I'm coachable. And she rejects me and I say, well, there's got to be something I can do. And she said, there is. Go volunteer on a hotline. Now, until you've done that, stop bothering me. So I went volunteered. I found a hotline, happened to be the hotline that she had volunteered on. And I got back to her about 5 months after I'd been on the lines. And she was shocked. Like, I tell everybody to do that. Nobody does it. And I was shocked. I'm like, if I ask, why wouldn't I do it? Like, why in God's name would I ask if I wasn't going to do it? But in point of fact, most people don't do what you tell them to do. So then I got on the line, and when in the training they say, all right, so just so you know up front, all calls are limited to 20 minutes. And I remember saying, like, 20 minutes? You got to be kidding me. And they say, no, as a matter of fact, if you're doing it right, it won't take that long. And so you get on the line, so when you understand the actual application of empathy, like it moves very quickly, ridiculously fast. And there's law enforcement data that says that interviewers who use active listening, empathy skills, actually use them, get collaboration confession 14 times faster than anybody else does. 14 times faster. So I'm on a hotline and I'm seeing this ridiculous transformation in people in 20 minutes or less. And I thought, are people in crisis the only people that deserve to be understood without being judged, without being given any advice? One of the critical issues was never give advice, ever. And I started using it in my personal life, and it started making, I don't do it all the time. I'm not flawless, but it's transformative faster than anything else is.
Did that negatively affect you or influence you after getting off some of those calls? Because I imagine that you have to have a somewhat thick skin. And if I were to hear those situations, I don't think I'd mentally be able to comprehend what these people are going through.
Well, if you go through the training regardless and you stick to the training, you're going to be fine. It didn't mentally affect me, and I didn't suffer burnout. All crisis hotlines, their number one problem is volunteer burnout. Funding is close on the heels with number two, but it's not number one. And I wasn't vulnerable to it because I went there to learn a skill. I went there as a mercenary. Now, actually helping people, I really enjoyed that. I mean, I got a kick out of the fact that somebody could be lost and 20 minutes later be back on better footing. Most people go to hotlines to help. And if you're there to help, then you're vulnerable to the emotional burnout that you're talking about, because you can't help everybody. And there are actually a significant percentage of people that call in to not be helped. If someone's genuinely in crisis, they're going to listen to you. But because you're supposed to listen as a volunteer, there's a bunch of people out there, the energy vampires, the people that nobody could stand, they crawl crisis hotlines to prove that the world sucks. And they're going to prove that the world sucks by abusing the person on the other end of the line. So that's the source of real burnout on all these volunteer lines, the frequent callers that are there simply to abuse you.
So what's the common and ineffective way that people would fail helping or attempting to help people calling on the crisis helpline versus the uncommon and more effective thing that you can get someone off of a ledge in 20 minutes or less?
Yeah, well, the first predisposition to advice. Advice is debilitating to the other person. If I'm giving you advice on an emotional level, I'm talking down to you. I'm saying, look, just be as smart as I am. Here's a smart thing to do. Why don't you do the smart thing? What's the matter with you? That's what advice is. And advice is frequently significantly flawed unless somebody's got experience doing it. If they've been there, if they've actually dealt with the problem. And then if they've actually dealt with the problem, if you don't feel emotionally connected, you don't care about their advice anyway, because you feel dismissed, you feel talked down to. Just because advice is wrong doesn't mean it's not well-intentioned. Just because you shouldn't be giving advice doesn't mean that your heart is in the wrong place, that you're not actually trying to help. Those are two separate things that are simultaneously true. Advice doesn't do anybody any good, and your heart can be in the right place. Why don't most people know? Because empathy is invisible. Like, we see people giving advice all the time. Our advice might be accurate because we're not emotionally involved. We don't know all the dynamics that are there. So you don't see it in everyday life. And then, of course, in the movies and TV, somebody gives somebody else advice, and they go like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's insightful. Or they'll say something really stupid like, I know how you feel. I suffered loss too. But if I'm using empathy with you, internally it's going to be landing well. And unless he knows what he's looking for, he's not going to see it. He's not going to see it at all. And it's astonishing and visible. It's not celebratory.
But you're talking about using empathy instead of advice. What's the difference between empathy, compassion, and sympathy?
That's a brilliant question. All right, so the best description of empathy is simply the transmission of information without taking a position on it, not saying it's right or wrong, not saying yes or no, good or bad. Stephen Kotler, a friend of mine, has written a number of great books. Anything he has got Stephen Kotler's name on it, you probably ought to read it. And he said, empathy is about the transmission of information. Compassion is the reaction to that transmission. So what's an example of empathy? So I'm with the FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force, New York City. At the time, First World Trade Center bombing, subsequent plot to blow up 4 locations in New York City simultaneously. Guys who claim to be Muslims, Islamic terrorists, if you will, to put a brand on them. All of the witnesses that we put at trial, 99% of them. A couple witnesses testified to bargain their way into lighter sentences, but the vast majority of witnesses are there voluntarily. Arab Muslims from the Middle East testifying against a man who has legitimate credentials as a cleric, an Islamic cleric. He's got legitimate credentials. He's been to Al-Azhar University in Egypt, as an expert on a religion. He also was inciting others to commit, which is a crime. So what are these guys thinking? If an Egyptian Muslim in the United States driving a cab, when they look at me, representative of the FBI, they're thinking like, you're from an anti-Islamic country. Your country, no matter what you guys say, has got a history of being anti-Islamic for the last 200 years, which is what I would say to him. I'd sit down and I'd say, I know you believe that the United States government has been anti-Islamic for the last 200 years. That's their perspective. But me saying it out loud, not just understanding it, I got to say it out loud, particularly if it's against me. And they'd be shocked that I could say it and then not go, but we have a First Amendment, but we believe in freedom of religion, but. They don't care about that. When I lay out your point of view, the way you see it, and don't explain any of it away, particularly stuff that I know the negative light that you see me in, what do I look like to you? A straight shooter, somebody you can count on, somebody that tells the truth no matter what the truth is, and I'm not afraid of it, which gives me a massive amount of credibility, and it completely changes your perspective on me.
Do you try to then use the but at some other point
Never.
afterwards?
Never.
Then how do you lean the conversation away from, you must believe this. How can you then articulate your own point across to maybe have them hear a different perspective?
Well, if I want to share some thoughts with you, I will first plan on laying it out in really small doses. And I'm going to read your reaction all along the way, see if I see skepticism, see if you're with me. But I will ask permission to share with a no-warranted question. And I'll say, is it a ridiculous idea for me to share a couple thoughts with you? If the answer is yes, then I'm not going to share them. But if the answer is no, then you'll listen to me in small doses. I'm not going to try to make a 25-point argument. Conversation should be back and forth, and I should be paying attention to you. And if I see a look on your face where you reacted. That would be what we refer to as an affect change. If any expression on your face changes, something has crossed your mind. Now, I don't know what it is, which is why we don't teach body language. If I'm really good at body language, it means I'm going to be right about a third of the time, which means 2/3 of the time I'm going to be wrong. Like a classic example I heard, if somebody's listening to you and they're scowling, they could be angry. They could have gas. Nothing alike. And I'm one of those people, if I'm listening intently to you, I have a resting serial killer face. I'm looking at you like I'm thinking about eating you with a nice Chianti and some fava beans. Like I scare people, I listen so intently. So if you thought I was angry and then you proceeded as if you were correct in that assumption, then we're going to get off track really fast. I see something cross your mind. I'll say, looks like something just crossed your mind. And you're very likely to tell me exactly what it is. Because I recognize, because I'm watching, I'm paying attention. And you appreciate the fact that I saw that. Now, with something cross your mind, if I keep going, you're distracted by what just crossed your mind and you're going to miss everything I say. So I got to stop there and find out what's going on. And that's why, I'm gonna proceed in my thoughts a little bit at a time, and I'm gonna make sure that we're in alignment the whole time.